It lies in a place where no sunlight reaches, a tiny gland no larger than a grain of rice, buried beneath the cerebral hemispheres, floating like a pearl in the third ventricle of the brain. The pineal gland, named for its pinnacone-like shape, is neither heart nor limb, yet for thousands of years, sages, mystics, and initiates across the ancient world believed it held a key, a gateway, a lens through which the soul could gaze upon realms unseen. René Descartes, the 17th century philosopher often remembered for cogito, ergo sum, called it the seat of the soul. In an age ruled by mechanical logic, Descartes whispered of something different, a place where the material and immaterial touched. He believed the pineal gland was singular, unlike other parts of the brain which exist in pairs. It was, in his words, the one organ that allowed the soul to interface with the body. But Descartes was not the first. He had merely inherited a fragment of a far older knowing. Long before him, the Egyptians carved it into their temples. The Eye of Horus, often mistaken as just a symbol of protection, mirrors precisely the anatomy of the pineal gland when superimposed on a sagittal section of the human brain. Coincidence or echo, were their gods anatomical metaphors? Or were our bodies the temples their myths described? To the Babylonians, it was a star within the head, the shining Ishtar, while in Mesopotamia, the pine cone was placed in the hands of gods and kings alike, not as an ornamental flourish, but as sacred code. Even the papal staff of the Vatican holds a pinnacone at its apex, a silent token from a much older lineage. All across the world, the pinnacone reappears in Assyrian carvings, Dionysian rites, in the hands of Thoth and Osiris, atop Sumerian gods standing before the tree of life. It is the seed, the spiral, the reminder that within us is a sacred axis, a microcosmic mirror of the macrocosm. And if we look closer, we find this is no poetic metaphor. The pineal gland is sensitive to light, though it lies entombed in darkness. It governs the rhythms of sleep and dream. But its true nature, according to the ancients, lies not in biology, but in initiation. It was not just a gland, it was an eye, not the eye that sees outward, but the one that sees inward. The third eye, mystics speak of it glowing violet at the moment of transcendence. Yogs called it Aina, the brow chakra, the command center, the inner sun. In Buddhist iconography, it is the urna, the dot of awakened sight on the forehead of the enlightened. The Mayans believed it to be the door of the gods, through which vision crossed dimensions. Even Plato, in his Timaeus, suggested the soul had a charioteer's eye, an organ of divine perception that could be blinded by excess or ignorance. What is it about this small gland that has inspired so many traditions, so many symbols, across so many epochs? How did cultures with no contact describe the same organ in almost mystical terms? Was it myth converging around a shared archetype, or shared memory? Today, modern science treats it as a regulator of circadian rhythms, secreting melatonin in response to the cycle of night and day. But even within that explanation lies a key. For the ancients, the veil between worlds was always thinnest in darkness, and it is in darkness that the pineal awakens. As you sit now listening, the light in your room is being interpreted through your eyes, sent as signals through neurons, until in the deepest chamber of the brain, the pineal receives it. And when the lights go out, it changes, it stirs. Perhaps that is why initiation in ancient temples always began in the dark, not as punishment, but as preparation. Because darkness does not blind, it reveals. This is the first veil, the realization that your body holds within it an organ of light, one that sees without eyes, remembers what was never taught, and waits silently to be reawakened. And now we walk forward, past the veil, into the myths and sacred symbols left behind by those who once used this sight to see the stars within. In the deserts of ancient Egypt, beneath the heat-warped air and eternal silence of stone, priests once whispered secrets to those who passed their initiatory trials. These were not lessons spoken, but transmitted through gesture, ritual, and symbol, and chief among those symbols was the Ujet, the Eye of Horus, more than a symbol of protection. The eye was a spiritual cipher. The parts of the eye, eyebrow, spiral, teardrop, and more, represented fractions, geometries, frequencies of reality itself. To the uninitiated, it was art. To the priest-kings, it was a map of consciousness. In profile, it matched precisely the human brain, with the spiral of the pineal gland at its center. In India, thousands of miles away and centuries earlier, Vedic seers spoke of Anew, the sixth chakra, the command center. It was not simply a point on the forehead, it was the subtle organ of vision in the realm of subtle matter. Through it, yogs claimed to witness the inner flame, the light behind thought. The lotus of higher mind, when fully awakened, it allowed one to see the truth behind appearance, to perceive Maya not as illusion but as symbol, a reflection of the eternal. These two symbols, Anew and the Eye of Horus, may seem separate, but beneath their surface, they both speak of one thing, a forgotten capacity of the human spirit, a faculty lost not by evolution, but by suppression. The ancient Chinese called it the heavenly eye, and Taoist alchemical texts, it was described as a pearl floating between the brows, which could be cultivated with breath, intention, and silence. In Tibetan Buddhism, adepts who had awakened this eye were called those who see the clear light, able to guide the soul through the bardo, the space between death and rebirth. Among the Dogon people of Mali, there are tales of an inner vision taught by star beings, ancestors from Sirius, who showed them how to navigate not by stars, but by the light within. This same light was referred to by Gnostic texts, where Christ was not a man but a spark, a flame hidden in flesh, an awakener of the divine vision within each soul. And so, across continents and millennia, the same image returns, an inner eye, not metaphorical, not symbolic alone, but real, cultivable, sacred. Initiates from the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece to the ancient shamans of the Amazon drank the sacred brews and walked the shar. Dowed corridors of death, not to escape reality, but to pierce it. They emerged altered, not because they had seen hallucinations, but because they had remembered. They had accessed, through the pineal, through the third eye, a world older than time and more intimate than breath. How could these traditions, born in isolation, echo the same knowing? Perhaps the answer lies not in their contact with each other, but in their contact with something else, a realm, a frequency, a dimension we are born with the keys to, but taught to forget. In the temples of Angkor Wat, in the spiral glyphs of Mesoamerican codices, in the serpent crowns of pre-Columbian shamans, we find the same spiral, the same eye motif coiled in stone, embedded in gold, whispered in myths. They were not obsessed with ornament. They were building mnemonic devices, sacred architecture that would outlast language and empire. They were encoding a spiritual organ, so that when the world forgot, the stones would remember. The third eye is not just a symbol. It is a relic, not of the past, but of the soul, a still beating ember from a fire lit long before recorded time. To activate it is not to gain a superpower. It is to return to the original perception, the Edenic clarity before the fall into duality. In ancient Hermetic texts, this was called nous, the divine mind, a way of seeing that transcends the senses. In the words of the Corpus Hermeticum, there is an eye of the soul, and if by it you look, you shall see light. We are not taught to use this eye. We are taught to doubt it, distract it, close it, but the ancients remind us that it is still there waiting, and when it opens, it does not merely see another world. It reveals that this world, too, has always been sacred. We just forgot how to see. As the seeker draws closer to this truth, they must pass through the veil of physiology and into the paradox of the pineal itself. How something so small and so hidden can shape the experience of reality itself. We now descend deeper into the hidden chamber of the gland itself, to uncover what it does, what it secretes, and what ancient orders believed it could awaken: darkness, stillness, silence. It is in this void that the pineal gland begins to stir, though modern science reduces it to a regulator of melatonin, the hormone of sleep. The ancients believed this small gland was the mouth of prophecy, a whisperer of dreams, a point where spirit and matter kissed. This was not romantic metaphor. Modern research confirms the pineal gland is light sensitive, though it lies buried in the heart of the brain. Unlike any other part of the central nervous system, it is connected directly to the retina, a third eye in the truest sense, but where our outer eyes cease to function in darkness. The pineal awakens in the black void of deep meditation, in the silent hours of early morning, in the sacred rites of ancient night ceremonies. Something happens. The pineal emits melatonin, yes, but also it is suspected to synthesize something far stranger: dimethyltryptamine DMT, this elusive molecule, found in the plants used by Amazonian shamans and in the bloodstream during moments of birth, death, and extreme spiritual experiences, has been described by some as the spirit molecule. In trace amounts, it exists in the human brain, though its origins remain shrouded. Its presence in the pineal gland, while still debated, has long been a matter of fascination for mystics and seekers. If the pineal does produce DMT even in microbursts, then it is not simply a gland. It is an oracle for those who have undergone initiatory rituals with DMT-rich plants such as ayahuasca. The effects are not drug-like. They are archetypal, mythic, structured. Entities appear. Teachings are imparted. A voice speaks from behind the veil. Not random, not chaotic. Something intelligent. Is this what the ancients meant when they spoke of divine vision in the Vedic tradition? The pineal was linked to tapas, inner fire. Yogs would sit for years in caves, not to escape the world, but to stimulate the serpent energy, kundalini, to rise from the base of the spine and pierce the third eye. When it did, visions came, but not hallucinations, revelations. Egyptian initiates underwent long periods of darkness and sensory deprivation within the pyramids. These weren't tombs. They were chambers of transformation. The dark activated the gland, the silence cleared the interference, and in this perfect stillness, the eye opened. This is echoed in the Eleusinian mysteries of Greece, where initiates drank the chichen, a sacred brew believed to be psychoactive. What they saw was not shared, bound by oaths of secrecy, but those who emerged claimed to have died before death, and something in their eyes had changed. The pineal gland, then, is not a passive instrument. It is a liminal threshold, sensitive to magnetic fields, attuned to cosmic rhythms, responsive to silence and shadow. It is a sacred relic of our forgotten anatomy. Why, then, is it dormant in most? The Hermeticists taught that man is a dual being, half beast, half God, and that the divine faculties must be cultivated. The pineal, they said, is not dead, it is asleep. Its dormancy is a protective slumber, to shield it from the noise and profanation of a world obsessed with sensation, but within sacred mystery. Schools, its awakening was the final rite. The Rosicrucians spoke of it as the window of the house through which the soul could speak with the stars. The alchemists sought not to transmute lead into gold, but base perception into divine sight. This inner gold, they believed, flowed only when the pineal was activated. It was the elixir, the prima materia, the philosopher's stone hidden not in earth, but in skull. And so, this gland, silent, overlooked, and small, was revered more than any organ of the body, because it held the key to true vision, not the vision of forms and shadows, but the vision of essence. But awakening it came at a cost. To see the eternal, one must first let go of the temporal. The pineal does not whisper to the curious. It whispers to the ready, to those who have prepared the vessel, through purification, devotion, suffering, or silence. And those whispers, when heard, change everything. Now, the seeker must confront the ancient symbols that encoded this mystery: serpents, staffs, pinnacones, and temples aligned with the heavens, for these are not relics of superstition, but diagrams of the sacred technology buried within the human frame. The serpent has long been feared in the Western mind, cast as the deceiver of Eden, the whisperer of sin, and yet, in nearly every ancient tradition that predates the fall narratives, the serpent is not a corrupter, it is a liberator, a symbol, not of evil, but of awakening. In Hindu cosmology, it is Kundalini, the coiled serpent energy at the base of the spine. When roused, it rises through the 7 chakras like a serpent climbing a ladder, until it strikes the crown and the third eye opens. The pineal, they believe, is the destination of this ascent, the final gate. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs wore the uraeus, a rearing cobra, at the center of their brow. It was no mere decoration. It marked them as awakened, crowned by the living serpent of divine perception, to where the serpent was to see as the gods see. In Greece, the god Hermes carried the caduceus, 2 serpents entwined around a staff, rising in perfect symmetry. Today it is wrongly used as the symbol of medicine, but its original meaning was far more mystical. The staff was the human spine. The serpents, the dual currents of energy, solar and lunar, masculine and feminine, Ida and Pingala, rising in balance toward the pineal, which shone as the winged orb at the top. And here we encounter the ancient principle hidden in plain view. The body is a temple, the brain is its inner sanctum, the pineal is its holy of holies. The ancients understood this not metaphorically, but architecturally. The great cathedrals and temples of the ancient world were not designed for worship alone, they were maps of the human energetic anatomy. Sacred geometry encoded the body's dimensions, and encoded most precisely the journey to the third eye. Look to the pine cone. It reappears with haunting consistency in the hand of the Sumerian gods, atop the staff of Osiris. Crowning, the thyrsus of Dionysus, sculpted at the Vatican's Cortile della Pigna, the courtyard of the Pinnacone placed directly before the old papal apartments. It is the seed, the spiral, the Fibonacci code, and it is the symbol of the pineal gland. Why a pinnacone? Because in nature, the pinnacone is a perfect example of sacred geometry, spiraling in accordance with the golden ratio, opening only when the conditions are right. Just as the pineal, nestled in darkness, opens only to inner light. In the Mayan world, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl was the bringer of knowledge and cosmic order. He descended from the stars to reawaken human sight. His serpent form was not grotesque, but celestial. Feathers representing the higher realms, serpent representing earth, their union, the bridge, the spinal column, the ladder between worlds. At its apex, the third eye. Even in Christian tradition, buried beneath layers of allegory, we find echoes of this inner ascent. The book of Revelation speaks of a seal upon the foreheads of the elect, not a mark of ownership, but a sign of awakened sight. In the apocryphal Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." The pineal, hidden, revered, feared, these symbols are not scattered. They form a precise language and esoteric cartography of the soul. The tree of life, always a vertical image. From Kabbalah to Norse Yggdrasil is the spine, its roots in earth, its branches in heaven. The staff is the spine, the serpent is the rising current, the eye is the pineal, the temple is the skull. The alchemists encoded this in their riddles and drawings. The androgynous figure, serpent trapped, crowned by the radiant eye or solar disk, not fantasy, instruction. The temples of ancient civilizations were built as giant analogues of the body, chambers arranged according to cosmic alignments, inner sanctums designed to resonate with chants, harmonics, breath. The Great Pyramid itself, with its hidden chamber where no body was ever buried, may well have been a device of initiation, a place where the adept, immersed in darkness and perfect silence, could activate the pineal and step into non-ordinary vision. The priests of these waters were not priests in the modern sense. They were engineers of consciousness, masters of breath, vibration, geometry, and symbol. They did not speak to gods, they became them. But in time, this knowledge was fractured, suppressed, demonized, replaced with dogma and fear, and so the symbols remained, but their meanings were buried. What once was sacred architecture became mere religion. What once was an inner ascent became a myth. And yet, the body has not changed. The map is still encoded. The serpents still rise. The eye still waits, but not all forgot. Some kept the flame alive in silence, in shadow, in secret orders, and whispered lineages. But as the world turned toward machines and matter, another force began to intervene, a force that would seek not only to bury this knowledge, but to poison it at its source. Now the seeker must face the great forgetting and uncover how history, policy, and science conspired to close the eye. There is a silence heavier than ignorance. The silence of intentional forgetting, not the absence of knowledge, but its burial, not blindness, but blinding. The ancients built temples to awaken the third eye, but modernity, it built prisons of perception. In this world, awakening is not celebrated. It is inconvenient. For an awakened eye sees not just beyond, it sees through illusion, through hierarchy, through the veil of consensus reality. And that is dangerous. In the age of empires, when spiritual vision could not be controlled, it was demonized. The sacred serpent became Satan, the divine feminine burned as witch, the mystic became heretic, and the third eye, once the crown of kings, was rendered superstition, a relic of madness, a pseudoscience. But the true blow came not from religion, but from a new priesthood, science divorced from spirit. As the Enlightenment dawned, and reason replaced ritual, the body became a machine, the soul a myth. The pineal was dissected, labeled a curiosity, dismissed as the vestigial, a tiny calcified gland, they said, nothing more. But it is here the silence grows most suspicious. For while they called it vestigial, they also targeted it. In the mid-20th century, something began to happen. The mass fluoridation of water supplies, justified in the name of dental health, coincided with a strange discovery. Fluoride, more than any other substance, accumulates in the pineal gland. This was confirmed by British scientist Jennifer Luke in the 1990s. Her research showed that the pineal absorbed more fluoride than any other soft tissue in the body, leading to early calcification, a hardening, a closing. Calcified pineal glands cannot respond to light, cannot properly produce melatonin, cannot regulate rhythms, but deeper still, the inner perception, the dreams, the quiet intuitions, they fade. Was this deliberate? Many say no, that it was an accident of public policy. But in a world where ancient symbols lie hidden in plain view on government buildings, where elite orders trace their lineage back to Egypt and Babylon, can we afford to be naive? This is not conspiracy, it is pattern, a pattern of disconnection, not just of gland from light, but of soul from source. Television, artificial light, constant noise, pharmaceutical dependency, chemical skies, all create a perfect storm not for control of the body, but the perception of reality. Because when the third eye closes, we do not merely lose access to other worlds. We forget that this world is alive, that time is not linear, that history is not random, that we are not machines. And so the temples became churches, the initiations became school bells, the serpents were flattened into cartoons, the sacred chants replaced by commercial jingles. Inner vision became entertainment, and the eye went dark. But not completely, for in every age of forgetting, there are keepers of the flame, those who walk the margins, shamans, mystics, dreamers, poets, rebels, those whose glands, against all odds, did not calcify, those who still dream vividly. who still feel the pulses of unseen realms. You may be one of them. You may have already felt it, that tickle in the brow during deep meditation, the spark behind the eyes when truth is spoken, the sudden knowing that something more is waiting. And you are right, for the eye does not close forever, sleeps, and sleep can be broken not through force, but through remembrance. Now the seeker must complete the path, not with history, but with practice, with the rites and rituals, the sacred alignments, the long-lost arts of awakening. It is time to reclaim the eye, not to open it, but to let it remember it was never truly closed. It begins as a pulse, not loud, not sudden, but ancient, familiar, a warmth behind the forehead, a silence filled with music, an invisible axis aligning the body with the stars. The third eye is not opened with force. It unfolds like a flower in stillness, in presence, in reverent preparation. The traditions that guarded this wisdom left behind not commandments, but practices, rituals not for worshipping gods, but for becoming them. In the Vedic systems, the breath was the sacred chariot, pranayama, the disciplined regulation of life force, purified the inner pathways. The mind was stilled, the serpent stirred. When the breath became one with the void, the brow ignited. In Egypt, initiates underwent fasting, silence, darkness. The body was deprived not to weaken it, but to tune it like an instrument made, ready to receive celestial harmony. Oils were anointed on the brow. Gold, mixed with blue lotus, was ingested. The pineal, a cosmic receiver, was cleansed. In ancient Greece. The Delphic oracle inhaled vapors from the earth. She did not guess the future, she pierced it. The temple of Apollo was not a shrine to a sun god, but to the inner sun, the radiant mind. And the shamans, they sang in tongues not their own. They journeyed through plants and sacred songs, unlocking the spiral ladders inside. They taught that the world is dream, and that the dreamer can awaken within the dream, if the eye remembers how to see. Today, in the ruins of these traditions, fragments remain: stillness, breathwork, meditation in darkness, fasting from noise, from artificial light, from addiction to surface. Chants that activate vibration in the skull, visualizations of the indigo flame, gazing into candlelight, immersing in sunrises, sleeping under starlight. But the most powerful key is this: attention. The pineal does not open with technique alone. It opens when the attention is gathered, when all distractions are burned away, when the soul becomes singular in its desire to know, not intellectually, but directly. That knowing cannot be described, but all who have seen through the eye know the feeling that time is circular, that life is not random, that you have lived before, that this reality is not the end, nor the beginning, but a veil and a mirror. And more than that, a voice speaks, not in language, not with instructions, but with a presence, as if the universe itself has turned to face you and says, "You have always been here." This is the return of the inner sun, not the solar disk in the sky, but the radiant source at the center of you. The pineal is the lens, the third eye is the window, and what it reveals is not another world, but the sacredness of this one. In this state, the ancient texts make perfect sense. The symbols realign. The serpent becomes wisdom, the staff becomes ascent, the pinnacle opens, the temple breathes. You walk not in a world of matter, but of meaning. Every moment, a message. Every face, a mask of the divine. Every breath, a return. This is not theory. It is experience. It is initiation. It is the final remembering. And when it comes, you will know that the eye was never blind, that the darkness was never empty, that the veil was never real, and that you are not learning, you are awakening, and the sun has already risen.